been losing time apparently just ever so slightly, and I didn't notice it. And we've had power outages, so like all the other clocks are synced to that one clock, which is really funny because now all the clocks in the house are wrong.
Uh-oh.
And so part of the reason why I've been late, I didn't even know I was late.
Oh, that's
All of a sudden
hilarious.
I was looking, yeah, right. Now you get it.
Okay.
I'm like, so while I'm on this, I am fixing this damn clock. I'm telling you.
That's hilarious. Do you know if SR is going to be here?
I am not sure. I know normally he works on Monday and Friday,
Okay.
so I'm guessing probably not.
I'm gonna bring Renee up and see if she can accept the co-host, because I know you have an issue with getting bumped out. So I don't know. I don't know.
Hopefully this is going to, everything looks good today, so hopefully I don't have any problems.
All right, I sent you the invite, Renee. Okay, we're gonna get started. So where we left off on, let's see, let me give her the let me hold on just a second. I'll send it to you again, Renee. You don't have to request it. It's just something that I send to you if you click on it. All right, I'll try it one more time. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, it's not going to work. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So where we left off on Thursday is the conversation about the Paget Browns Sea Green and the Carib Holdings Limited and Sea Green's air transport and all of the aircraft, St. Lucia Airways, and all of them being tied to CIA, Mafia, and the corresponding trafficking of drugs and weapons. So when you take all of that together, it demonstrates that the Paget Browns Sea Green was maintaining Boeing 707s for the CIA. Paget Brown was involved with a Chicago attorney, Burton Cantor, who we've ran across, CIA operative Paul Helliwell and their Castle Bank, as well as Penn State professor Alan Block. Penn State professor Alan Block reported in a book called Masters of Paradise that in 1976, Paul Helliwell of the opium in Southeast Asia, Castle Bank, Walt Disney World, he's the guy that bought up all the land for Disney, contacted the head of Castle Bank's Cayman Island office to tell him that Cantor was coming down to go through the files. After Cantor had inspected them, he instructed the director to destroy some of them. He put some of them back and then also stored a certain amount of them in a special security area. Helliwell then told the director to buy a secure, fireproof filing cabinet, put the special files in that cabinet, lock it, and take it to Ian Paget Brown, the key. This was the same Ian Paget Brown whose company was borrowing money from Mainland Savings. Mainland Savings failed on April 4th, 1986. The way the Federal Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation handled Mainland's failure has made it impossible to tell the exact losses, but they have been estimated to be $500 million. Although the FBI was investigating mainland since it failed, there have been only 2 indictments of mainland officials. Twin brothers from England, Philip and Thomas Noonse, Noose, who worked at mainland in middle management. They were indicted for using offshore companies to buy mainland assets at below fair market value. Not only did the Noonse brothers have little to nothing to do with the actual failure of mainland, their indictments were the result of information dug up by private investigators, not the FBI. After mainland failed, the Federal Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation hired the Houston law firm of Andrews and Kurth to investigate the failure, file a lawsuit against the officers and directors, and recover all assets that were fraudulently taken from mainland. Although Andrews and Kurth was paid millions of dollars for its legal work at mainland, it apparently did not recover a single penny. Much of the law firm's effort was spent defending mainland. And thus, several of its officers, including Raymond Hill, from a single lawsuit brought by one of the borrowers who claimed that he had been cheated from mainland, was the only actual legal action taken against the people who were actually responsible. After the feds and Andrews and Kurth had allowed the statute of limitations to expire for filing a lawsuit for damages against the officers, and the newspapers wrote scathing stories about this, a large manila envelope without a return address showed up on the book author's desk. It contained a lawsuit drawn up by Andrews and Kurth against the officers and directors of mainland that had never been filed. The unfiled lawsuit contains page after page of detailed allegations of wrongdoing, including criminal activity. When confronted with this, officials from the Savings and Loan Insurance Corporation acknowledged that there had been wrongdoing at mainland, but it wouldn't have been worth filing a lawsuit over. $500 million was stolen from us. They said that the former officers and directors at mainland didn't have enough assets to warrant the expense of a lawsuit. So they were just free to go get other jobs, never held accountable. When I took the unfiled lawsuit to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston to show prosecutors and FBI agents the details of the alleged criminal wrongdoings, the only question the U.S. Attorney Henry Onken, Oncken, asked was, you guessed it, where did you get that information? Was not at all concerned with what it said. He just wanted to know how the reporter got it. Onken was later drummed out of his job after his office was subjected to criticism, including some blasts from congressional committees for attempting to downplay the extent of the fraud in Houston savings and loans and for not cracking down on that fraud. It was later discovered that Onken had several loans from the exact same savings and loans. So they just bought him off. Before Onken was named U.S. Attorney, he had worked for Harris County District Attorney, and before that, a Houston developer who was partners with Walter Mitchner. Let that sink in. He was inside, pretending to be a DOJ official that was supposed to be prosecuting the wrongdoers, and he was one of them. The claim by the feds that mainland officers and directors didn't have any assets to go after was nonsense, and proven so in the details of the unfiled lawsuit. The attorneys at Andrews and Kurth determined that Raymond Hill had received $4 million in dividends, salary, and legal fees from mainland in just the last 4 years that he was chairman. Hill not only was the largest stockholder at Mainland and the chairman, his law firm handled property foreclosures for Mainland. Hill, according to the unfiled lawsuit, drained in excess of $4 million from Mainland or its subsidiaries during a period where Mainland's financial condition was crumbling. The total compensation which Hill extracted from Mainland between 82 and 85 was outrageous, unreasonable, excessive, and not commensurate with the quality of his duties at Mainland. He destroyed it and got paid handsomely for it. Hill, who happened to also be an Episcopalian Sunday school teacher, was typical of the unrepentant. He said he had done nothing wrong and claimed that the statements in the unfiled lawsuit was libelous. He also claimed to be broke, although he never disputed the actual dollar figures in the unfiled lawsuits for his services. Hill had that attitude because Mainland did business with Mafia associates and CIA operatives, and because Walter Mitchner was his mentor. He thought he was untouchable. There has even been speculation that Hill had signed a secrecy agreement with the CIA himself. Basically, a get out of jail free card. The junior attorneys at Andrews and Kurth, who worked on the lawsuit, apparently wanted to file it against Hill and other Mainland officers, but the lawsuit was stopped at the upper echelons of the law firm and at the FDIC. During this time, the U.S. Treasury Secretary was none other than James Baker, who also was involved in it, who had moved on to be the White House Chief of Staff. Baker, also the former managing partner at Andrews and Kurth. So you want to know why the FDIC hired them to bury it? Because James Baker told them to hire his old law firm. James Baker was also very good friends with Raymond Hill. Their families were close. They grew up together and hung out together. When the author called Hill's office for comment about his relationship to Baker, Miss Macy, the same Hill employee who when asked about Hill's relationship to Mitchner, had called him back with a response that Mitchner was considerably older, not addressing the actual relationship. Was who he talked to when he called the office. In an April 2nd, 1990 letter to FBI Director William Sessions, Houston attorney Ted Walker, who had also borrowed money from Mainland and later filed a lawsuit against the savings and loan, told of a chance encounter he had had with Raymond Hill. According to him, on March 15, 1990, I'm quoting him, I happened to meet Raymond Hill, former chairman of the board and president of Mainland Savings, outside the Harris County Courthouse. After 7 years of disagreement between us, a friendly atmosphere was developed. During our curbside visit, Raymond Hill discussed his political connections within the Republican Party, one of which was James Baker. Raymond discussed in detail the family relationship that he had with the Hill family, and between him and the Hill family and Baker family, to include Christmas dinners for decades. In June 1985, after Mainland Savings had already made its disastrous deals with Howard Pulver's group and was negotiating its deal with Khashoggi, Secretary of Treasury Baker appeared before a Senate banking subcommittee and testified of the Reagan administration's optimism about how well the savings and loans industry was doing. Quote, I don't think there is any cause for undue concern, and I would reject any suggestion that we are in the midst of some kind of major systemic problem with respect to any element of our financial services industry, unquote. Knowing that to be a bold-faced lie. In the fall of 1987, when, the two researchers and the authors of this book were still trying to find more mafia connections to mainland, they got a phone call from the same anonymous source who had first tipped off them to mainland and Howard Pulver. This person, who they dubbed DT for Deep Throat, and whom other Houston Post reporters called Darth Vader because of his efforts to disguise his voice over the phone, told the authors to check out a lawsuit in San Diego that involved Herman Beebe, the mobster, and a man named Charles Bazarian, Bazarian. So they take off to San Diego. It was the first step in connecting the world of Beebe, the Louisiana mobster, and the world of Mario Renda, Renda, the New York mob associate involved in the failure of financial institutions across the country. Not only did the two show up in mainland, but they also appeared together in other places at other failed savings and loan, indicating the mafia's involvement in the entire enterprise. In 1981, Herman Beebe was looking around for a house to buy in La Costa, that development that we talked about a few chapters ago. While his house that he owned was being remodeled, he found a 5,000 square foot beach house overlooking Solana Beach, north of San Diego, which happens to be very close to my aunt's house where she used to live. Beebe brought Vernon Savings, Don Dixon, into a complicated refinancing and property swap deal with the house's owner and Beebe's Bossier Bank and Trust in Louisiana. They lent $750,000 to the owner. Beebe and Dixon then took possession of the house. In April 1983, the loan was transferred from Bossier Bank to Beebe's insurance company, Savings Life, and the loan was increased to $1.16 million. Then in November 1984, Dixon had the loan transferred to Paris Savings and Loan. By that time, Dixon was staying in the house on frequent trips to Southern California and using it to entertain Vernon Savings board members, customers, and at least one Texas Savings and Loan regulator that obviously was in their network. The beach house gained notoriety during the criminal trials of several of Vernon Savings and Loan executives and customers. Dixon, Vernon's president, Patrick King, and senior vice president John Hill were all convicted of using Vernon funds to provide prostitutes for Vernon officials and customers at the beach house. One time, a prostitute was provided for the Savings and Loan Commissioner, Linton Bowman, but apparently nothing was going on because he claimed in the trial he was impotent. Another time, after a wild 3-day party at the beach house, one of the prostitutes was found strangled, her mouth stuffed with gravel, and her clothes neatly stacked on top of her naked body. Officials said that she had recently been discovered as being a police informant. When Dixon started having financial problems in 1985 and was trying to distance himself from mobster Beebe, who was in criminal hot water himself, he brought a friend and borrower at Vernon's Savings to rent and possibly buy the beach house. It was Oklahoma con man and convicted felon Charles Bazarian. Bazarian actually lived in the house for 6 months and was supposed to buy it. He had been hiding out at the time, but eventually returned to Oklahoma, leaving behind several months of unpaid rent. The original owner of the house then filed a lawsuit against Beebe and Dixon and all of their corporate entities, claiming he had been cheated out of the equity in his house. Among those named as defendants in the second amended petition was Bazarian. When the author was sitting at his desk at the San Diego courthouse in January 1988, copying all of the information down, he had no idea who Bazarian was. When he returned to Houston and ran Bazarian's name through a computerized newspaper database, he realized he had hit the jackpot. Not only was Bazarian a friend of Mario Rendo, he had actually been convicted with Renda in a baking scam in Florida in 1987. This was Renda's first conviction for bank fraud, in which he got involved in a scam with Michael Rapp, R-A-P-P. We've come across him too. He's the former mob stockbroker with a new name, and Bazarian. The three cooked up a scheme to get control of Florida Center Bank during a Halloween party at Bazarian's mansion outside of Oklahoma City. It was a complicated scam using bounced checks, brokered deposits, and loans. It backfired on them, and they all got caught and convicted. Bazarian was also borrowing large amounts of money from a California savings and loan that Renda was brokering deposits to. And remember, brokering deposits is putting money on deposit at a bank and then dictating who that money gets lent to. It's literally money laundering made legal thanks to the Reagan administration, just in time for the Contra and everything else. Okay. Bazarian had numerous connections to Beebe's financial circle. He was a borrower from Dixon's Vernon Savings and was involved in a small Oklahoma savings and loan with Beebe's business associate, Michael Horn. Michael Horn is the guy that had worked at Mainland Savings, and before that for Walter Mitchner. Horn also did business at Ron Daly's First Savings of East Texas, which Daly was a cousin of Robert Corson, the guy that married Mitchner's daughter. You just can't make this shit up. Several years later, the Detroit Free Press reported that Bazarian showed up at Bloomfield Savings and Loan, located in Detroit, along with a mob lawyer, Morris Schenker. Obviously, something was big and involved the Mafia in the savings and loans all over the country. The author set out to see if they could find other connections between Beebe and Renda. One place where Renda and Beebe's circles intersected was San Diego, in the La Costa area of Southern California. Renda's wife, whose name was Antoinette Rizzo Renda, is the daughter of Vincent Rizzo, the owner of Bernardo Wineries in San Diego. In August 1982, Renda and several of his partners met at the La Casa Resort to talk over a new scam of brokered deposits to money launder. Renda and Beebe had bank accounts at a tiny bank outside of La Costa called San Deguento National Bank. In 1983, Beebe had a bank account there when he guaranteed the previously mentioned $75,000 loan to a travel agency controlled by Scott Salusa. We talked about that a couple of chapters ago. That same year, when the bank had less than $50 million in total deposits, some $700,000 of those deposits were union pension funds from New York City that had been wired there by Renda and his partner, Martin Swimmer. According to the indictment prepared by the Organized Crime Strike Force in Brooklyn, San DeQuinto National Bank was one of only 6 banks across the country where Renda and Swimmer had off-the-books accounts used in their criminal enterprise. Renda and Swimmer were convicted of racketeering in skimming union pension funds and bribing union officials for their off-book fraud. The first place officials found Renda and his deposits were Penn Square Bank in Oklahoma City. Fueled by brokered deposits from Renda and others, Penn Square had engaged in wild lending in the oil patch before expiring in 1982, even though it was only a $500 million institution. Penn Square had sold more than $2 billion in oil and gas loan participations to other banks. So way overextended themselves. 2 big banks that were nearly brought down by Penn Square's failure was Continental Illinois in Chicago. That's the one Illini and I were talking about in that long conversation the other day. And Seattle First National, or C-First. Continental had to be bailed out in 1984 to the tune of $4.5 billion, while C-First had to be sold to avoid a bailout. The FDIC paid off $218 million in insured deposits at Penn Square, the largest payoff since 1971, when $80 million was required for the failure of Sharpstown State Bank in Houston. This failure was part of a bigger political scandal. Some say the biggest political scandal in Texas history, the Sharpstown scandal. The Penn Square experience, this is a quote, gave us a rough alert to the damage that can be done by brokered deposits funneled through troubled institutions, said the former FDIC chairman, Irvin Sprague, in his book called Bailout. After Penn Square failed, Renda and others were called to testify before a congressional committee about brokered deposits, but nothing came of it. And apparently no one attempted to determine if any of the bad loans at Penn Square was linked to Renda's brokered deposits. Interestingly, Morris Schenker had a loan at Penn Square that went bad. In addition, Beebe's Bossier Bank and Trust was involved in a complex stock and nursing home deal with Penn Square as well. Renda was found at Empire Savings in Mesquite, Texas as well. It also failed in 1984 at a cost to the federal government, you and me, of $100 million. Empire's failure was the first big one after deregulation and signaled the beginning of the savings and loan debacle. Empire busted out because of its loans on large land flips and acreage of empty parcels. Sometimes they were even involved in incomplete condominiums along Interstate 30 east of Dallas. The small S&L ballooned from $13 million in deposit in 1982 to over $300 million 2 years later. That's money laundering. More than half of the deposits came from Mario Renda in his brokered loan scam. Since Empire failed, it had been the subject of massive civil and criminal investigations and litigations by federal and state authorities, and investigative reporting by both Dallas newspapers. More than 100 convictions have been obtained by prosecutors, although the biggest fish, the owner and major borrowers, escaped in their first trial with a hung jury. The Justice Department kept after them, though, and they were convicted in the second one and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Yet no one had been able to determine whether any of the loans that took Empire down was linked to Renda's deposits, and thus whether any of the money lost was in the hands of the Mafia. Not allowed to look there. The owner of Empire, Spencer Blaine, had been in the savings and loan business for a long time. He was a director of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Little Rock, which oversaw savings and loan for a 5-state area. Little Rock. Isn't that in Arkansas? Isn't that where Clinton was? Huh. He came to Empire after serving as president of First Federal Savings in Austin. He bought control of Empire from developer Danny Faulkner and his associates with an $800,000 loan from Faulkner and his partner, James Toller, who happened to be the former mayor of Garland, Texas. August 1982, Blaine paid off the Empire stock loan with a $2.25 million loan from Allied Lakewood Bank, i.e. Michener. So he's paying off a loan with another loan, but the second loan is a lot bigger than the first loan. Part of the loan was used to purchase land along Interstate 30 corridor, which Blaine flipped 6 months later and made a cool $15 million. Allied Lakewood Bank, where Toller was a director, was part of Walter Michener's Allied Bank empire. It was one of the banks listed in the 1985 Comptroller of the Currency report on Beebe as being controlled by the Mafia, Beebe himself. There were also connections between Beebe and Danny Faulkner. Danny Faulkner had started out as a high school dropout and painter who said he couldn't read or write. Faulkner and his associates were the main beneficiaries of Blaine and the Empire Bank, receiving over $100 million in loans that later went bad. They didn't pay them back. Dale Anderson, Beebe's former partner, said they didn't do any business directly with Faulkner, but they did meet with him to discuss business deals. As an associate of Faulkner and Blaine, a guy by the name of Robert Davis was indicted with Beebe in 1987 for bank fraud. The indictment alleged that Davis conspired with Mafia boss Beebe and others in misapplying loans from banks controlled by Beebe. Davis said insurance policies as an authorized representative of Lloyd's Texas Inc. on racehorses that were used as collateral for loans for Beebe and Davis. The indictment alleged that Davis and Beebe submitted false and fraudulent livestock mortality insurance binders pertaining to the collateral securing the loans at Beebe's bank. Now, I just want to point out there's people that have been posting more recently on X about all these dead racehorses. This is why. The charges against Davis were later separated from Beebe's because Beebe pleaded guilty. The charges against Davis were allowed by prosecutors to lapse, and he was never charged. The original indictment states that Davis committed his alleged acts in May and June of 1984. In July, the next month, Davis helped incorporate an insurance company called Lloyd's U.S. Corporation in Texas. Other investors was Faulkner's son-in-law, Kenneth Blanton, Faulkner's concrete supplier, Perry Bowden, his insurance agent, George May, and one of his bank partners, Clyde Vaughn. All of these people, with the possible exception of Vaughn, were involved in the Interstate 30 land deals with Empire Savings. In 1987, Lloyd's of London and Lloyd's US in federal court um, sued. So Lloyd's of London sued the Lloyd's US for basically name infringement. Lloyd's of London agreed not to say anything negative about Lloyd's US nor interfere in its business after the lawsuit was settled privately. Incredibly, Lloyd's of London, which brought the original action, agreed to pay Lloyd's US $6 million. It worked out to be about $300,000 per investor compared to their original $30,000 investment in the company. So again, that looks like another money laundering thing. And remember that we've tied Lloyd's of London, who was the major supporter of and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, that private military company that was set up in London, that they installed the mercenary that had been thrown in jail for doing a coup down in Africa. That guy created a private military company, and then basically went on, because the one he was associated with that he owned had been caught in doing coups in the world for MI6. He basically cleans himself up, sets up a new organization, and gets in business with Lloyd's of London to basically scare the shit out of everybody with mock terror attacks on ships in order to coerce all of the ship owners to get insurance for shipping. And this paramilitary guy was the one behind the scenes staging these terror attacks that were actually all fake in order to create this worldwide scare of everybody needing. So Lloyd's of London is not clean, is the point I'm trying to make. So it's not at all suspect that, I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's not outside the norm that Lloyd's of London would be giving this corporation, probably after they find out the CIA is behind it, this $6 million settlement, which basically gives all of these quote unquote investors a whole bunch of money. There's probably another deal, and that was just the payoff for it. The footprints of Renda and Beebe are found side by side as several other Texas savings and loan that all failed. In the Texas Panhandle, a former music teacher from Queens, New York, and the former Central Louisiana farm agent were, meaning Renda and Beebe, were involved in state savings and loan of Lubbock. Beebe financed the purchase of the bank with his associate Tyrell Barker by having his insurance company, Savings Life, lend Barker the $880,000 for the cash portion of the bill. So Beebe Life Insurance Company is loaning a cutout the money for him to buy the bank so it doesn't look like Beebe's doing it. In exchange, Barker pledged his stock in the savings and loan as collateral and gave Beebe an option to purchase 50% of the shares of the state savings parent company. In Beebe's bankruptcy case in Florida, the FDIC filed a complaint opposing the discharge of Beebe's debts and alleging, among other things, that Beebe maintained domination and control of state savings. Beebe and his associated companies also borrowed millions from state savings. In fact, Beebe pled guilty to bank fraud in 1988 involving a state savings loan. Barker was a developer from Northern California. He had met Don Dixon and come to Texas with him. They originally intended to buy a savings and loan together with help from Beebe, but they ultimately decided to get their own savings and loan, with Beebe financing Vernon Savings for Dixon and State Savings for Barker. So Beebe's buying more banks using cutouts. In 1987, Barker was convicted of bank fraud involving State Savings, Brownsville Savings in Brownsville, Texas, and Key Savings in Englewood, Colorado. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Also convicted was Barker's attorney, Lawrence Vineyard, who had purchased Key Savings with an $11 million loan from Vernon Savings. Massive money laundering. At the same time, Barker and Beebe were controlling the loans made by State Savings. Renda was brokering tens of millions of dollars in deposits into the savings and loan. He was getting a special interest rate on these deposits, meaning he was getting a slightly higher rate than other depositors. Such deals sometimes accompanied kickbacks to savings and loan officials, so they didn't say anything. They also skimmed some of the interest before the depositors got their money, including some of the pension fund money that was on deposit there. So they're using the pension fund money, paying themselves a higher interest than the pension fund, and the pension fund money is what they're using to loan out to all of this crazy garbage. Another savings and loan where Renda had a interest and a special rate was San Jacinto Savings in Houston, which was owned by Southmark, the Dallas-based real estate company and mob dumping ground for deals with Beebe. Renda had other business ties to Southmark as well. He and a partner were developing a thing called the Palace Hotel and Casino in Puerto Rico. They fell on hard times and the project went into bankruptcy. The Pratt Hotel Corporation, of which Southmark owned 37%, purchased the bankrupt property. Again, these are basically money laundering deals where you can get this after you've already siphoned a whole bunch of loans for pennies on the dollar, and then you go ahead and finish the construction project. The failure of Empire Savings, which began the Great Savings and Loan debacle, was preceded in time by 5 years by the failure of Houston Savings and Loan's Surety Savings, which was part of Texas Renebake scandal. It was a dress rehearsal for the collapse of the savings and loan. Surety Savings and the Texas Renebake scandal had it all. Mobsters, CIA, politician, Ben Barnes, which is Neil Bush's future business partner and sugar daddy. It had fraud. It had one of Michael Milken's biggest future clients. It had Teamster Union Deposits, a congressional investigation instigated by U.S. Representative Henry Gonzalez, a federal regulator named Rosemary Stewart, and Beebe and Michener. This earlier scandal shows that the savings and loan crisis was not isolated. It was not a one-off. Many of the participants had been up to the same dirty tricks before. The lesson is it happened before. And if we don't learn from it and people aren't held accountable, it'll happen again, which is something you guys hear me saying all the time because it's true. Okay, that gets us to chapter 6. We're going to stop there and we will resume there tomorrow. I see a Illini in the audience.
And Stellar.
And Stellar. Oh, there she is.
I might, but she mustn't be able to talk.
Yeah, I thought that was Renee because Renee was up there before. Cool.
Yeah, I know. She changed her icon now. I never recognize her. I always have to double check.
Yep. Okay. So again, just more data for us to recognize patterns in how they pull off money laundering, which obviously is very important for future books that we're going to be doing. We have to understand how they do these things in order to recognize patterns when they're being done. What's going on, Stellar?
It's just so coincidental that you're talking about laundering and what's going on in Minnesota, Michigan, and all that other stuff. Just amazing. Just amazing, those little freaking scoundrels.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting that no one talks about the money laundering that's going on with the quote unquote fraud in the Somalian uh, whatever neighborhoods. Do you honestly think that no one in Washington, D.C., none of the federal politicians, none of the state officials, I mean, I know we know some of the state officials were involved in it, that money didn't stay with them? Did they get paid for their participation? Absolutely. That's not why that was being done. And if anything illustrates that to me, it's how these things operate, like what we're reading in this book. All of these money laundering operations is to fund covert activity. They will pay people that conduct the fraud a nice fat bonus for doing it. They don't get to keep all of this money. This money is channeled in to covert activity. Otherwise, it would never be allowed to happen, ever. Renee, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Stella. It's okay.
There was like two more things. So, like you brought up Minnesota, and when we find out what's going on in Michigan, and isn't it coincidental about this, these, crazy stuff that's going on Texas, and with Abbott, who was like a crony to the Bushes and going back. So they've been planning this crap for a long time. Now I'm done. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah. Sorry. For some reason, I first just want to apologize. When you throw me or invite me to be a speaker in the beginning, I have an old dinosaur iPhone, and I see the invitation, but it doesn't show the complete bar at the bottom for some reason for me to click on it. So,
okay.
I'm thinking it's a phone problem, so sorry about that. But yeah, this chapter, and I mean, everything that's going on, even in present time, seems like we are getting close to the axis of this whole corrupt wheel. I mean, mentioning Lloyd's of London and then Paul Halliwell. Lloyd's of London was involved in ensuring the opium and slave trade back in the day with the East India Company. And Paul Halliwell is all over the place with OSS and the drug trade and setting up stuff in Miami and the Cuban exiles and law firms in Miami. I mean, and then in present time, we got this whole thing going on in the Caribbean, and it seems like it's merging of all this stuff. It's becoming a very obvious what does the Q say? Future proves past, right? In the Q post.
Yeah.
It seems we are at this stage and we're kind of there, no?
It does. And what I find most interesting about this is a lot of what is happening right now, had we not been doing this for the last 3 years, wouldn't make any sense to us. Right? We wouldn't see all of the connected pieces. Illini, go ahead.
Hey, Colonel. Yeah, Renee raises a good point. If I recall correctly, there was the couple on the Isle of Jersey who is descended from this lawyer who basically had, this whole room full of documents. And if I recall correctly, there's several tie-ins back to Pete Bruton's book. Back to this book.
Yes.
That couple basically came out with.
Yes.
as well as I think to BCCI.
Yes, you're right.
I will bet you too that there's stuff in the Paradise Papers on this as well. The last thought on all of this is Pete Bruton is still alive, and he's still a professor at Texas Tech. That would be a fascinating interview. And I think if he, researches who's reaching out to him, if it's a certain Air Force colonel, I think.
Oh
I
my
think he might
gosh,
respond.
what
And
a
I
great
think-
idea.
I think it would be really interesting at the very end of this series to
Oh my
bring him
gosh.
on.
Yeah, I agree. That would be fabulous. What a great idea. I'm going to reach out to him. Thank you. I did not realize that.
Colonel, can I jump in before I may get interrupted by my wife getting home?
Sure.
I think I told you that this is a book I read a long time ago, so I was really happy you were doing it. But a couple funny coincidences in this chapter. I got the first half. I used to be a member at the La Costa Country Club, and most of the old timers in San Diego know all about these stories. There's a lot more to it than this book touches on.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Yeah, well, it gets even better than that. First of all, it's pronounced Solana Beach, and it's been my hometown for most of my adult life. and my beach condo is about a quarter mile south of the beach house you're referring to. And again, our family moved there in 1985.
Do you have anything you want to tell me, Warhamster?
I don't have any juicy details, but when I used to sneak into the nightclub, I think it was like the Red Onion or something like that. I was 18 years old, and you see some pretty shady characters. But that area is now pretty much probably the least Mafia touched you'll ever see. The only real organized crime I've seen in the last 20 years is when I met Alan Glick. And that's a whole other story. But so this is all backyard stuff. I'm cracking up the whole time you're talking about it. It's like you pass these people on the beach walking your dog.
So it's funny that you say that, because my aunt that lived out there, she married my mom's brother. Okay. So he joined the Marines and was stationed at Camp Pendleton. They meet, they get married. He gets off active duty and stays there. Well, she was the bookkeeper for an Italian family who I got to meet. I went to their house. They lived in like a $5 million home right on the cliffs of, I'll have to remember the name of the restaurant, but I will. And she used to tell me all of these stories about this family and the people coming in. And now that I know they use restaurants for money laundering, and she was telling me some of because, I have a degree in business. And so she was telling me about some of the odd things that she had found in the books. And now it all makes so much more sense about listening to her tell me, because I was stationed in Los Angeles, and my daughter and I, all long weekends and holidays, I went down and stayed with my uncle and my aunt in the Escondido area, that type, in that general area. And that harbor, what's the name of the harbor there, Warhamster?
You got Oceanside Harbor and then San Diego Harbor.
Oceanside Harbor, where they do the little boat parade for Christmas.
Sure.
So they had an RV, and on Thanksgiving and on Christmas, that was only like 5 minutes from their house. They took their RV there, and we hung out during the day at the RV. And then, when they had the boat parade and stuff like that, we would stay there, and then we'd go back to the house, and my aunt and uncle would stay in their RV. So yeah, I'm very familiar with that area, and I think that's hilarious that that's literally your backyard.
So if you're thinking about a beach house on a cliff, it's going to be Carlsbad, Encinitas, or Solana Beach. It's one of those three. Those are the three areas that have beach houses on the cliffs.
Yeah.
It's all pretty much San Diego, North County. But the other fun connection is to understand the history of San Diego. It grew much later than Los Angeles and San Francisco, so it's a lot newer and not as quite as compacted. But the real growth was the Del Mar racetrack. Which is right there at Del Mar, basically 500 yards from my old condo. That was Mafia connected from the LA money.
100%.
And Bing Crosby was involved in that. His name's all over the racetrack. And And I mean, I got some funny stories to tell about that. I won't waste everyone with that. One last thought before I hog your spaces is since I appear to have a little bit more free time than expected over the next month or so, as I'm rehabilitating, I was just thinking about this. We did BCECI, and we've talked a lot about the banking intel connections. But do you think your audience would like maybe like a 2-hour real history of banking going back to the Venetians in the 1400s? Because I've got all those notes, and I can combine them with what you've done, and we could really do a full history of banking.
I think that would be awesome.
And ask everybody to tell me what you think.
Yeah.
I'll put it together, and I think it'd be fantastic.
Everybody's doing thumbs up, so 100%. So I think they're very into that.
I'll get to work on it one of these days.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. So it's Escondido is where their house was. And what I remember is driving out the road, and then we turned left along the row of cliff houses. Their house, when you pulled up, because my aunt had told me about these people's house. I'd ate at the restaurants because we ate there for free. And, I'd met the family and stuff like that. But they were having a special 4th of July. I forget what anniversary of the 4th of July it was, something special. They were having this big open house, and my aunt invited me and my daughter to go. And so when we pulled up, all you can see is the first story, and it's small. It just looks like, and I'm thinking, this can't be the right house. And so it's got 2 huge big dungeon doors that you go up to. We knocked on the door, they let us in. And when you walk into the room that you're in, it's a massive room that goes back quite far. But what you see as soon as you walk in this door is this etched piece of glass that has a line perfect with the ocean level, and porpoises etched in the glass jumping out of the water. And I'm like, what the hell? That was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And off to the left is this huge dining room with a real coral reef chandelier over this massive, because they had a huge family, massive dining room table. And because they were in the restaurant business, their kitchen had the ice cream parlor. It had a soda fountain. I mean, my daughter was like in, they had industrial grills, industrial refrigerators, everything. And the kitchen was massive. It went down 4 stories off the side of this cliff. And every story, the last story was like the grandkids' rec room. It had this massive sunken living room that had like 2 levels of sinking in it. And the bottom was full of pit balls, like for kids just to roll around in the ball thing. And there was cushions around the second level of the pit, and this massive TV that took up the entire wall so they could just sit down there and watch videos and stuff like that. It was the craziest house I've ever been in. And I assume now it would probably be something like 30 million, but the value of it, because I looked it up, was $5 million in the late 80s. It was one of the coolest houses, probably the coolest house I've ever been in.
So to put this into perspective for everybody, the way North County and San Diego is obviously the oceans to the west. You'll get about 50 yards of really nice white sand beach, and then you'll have these cliffs that go up about probably 50 yards high.
Yes.
And you'll have winding staircases, either private entrances to the beach, or you'll be like me, you'll be part of a big condo complex where you have your private entrance, where you have your own private stairs. And these houses are built into these cliffs, and these cliffs every single year crumble down onto the sand. They lose rock every year. In fact, the train that runs right along there got shut down for a couple of years because it was not stable going from parts of North County up to Orange County. And these people aren't worried about earthquakes at all. The running joke was that if we really want to be smart, invest in the small houses right across the street from these beach ones. So when they fall in the ocean,
you'll have beachfront.
Yeah, I got to correct you on one thing. It's not Escondido. We call it Escondildo.
Okay.
And that's one town over from where we were having the wedding celebration in May. So
cool. Yeah. So instead of just having, like he said, they're 50 feet in the air, but these people had just built their house down, and you literally just walked out a couple of steps and you were at the ocean. And they had the bocce ball court already done. It was like a permanent fixture in their backyard because that beach is private. It was, like I said, it was beyond crazy. All along, go ahead.
Colonel, also for Warhamster, I'm very curious about the San Diego history that you brought up. I'm like pretty darn ignorant about that area, and I should be way more knowledgeable about Los Angeles. But I get, as you're saying, that these could be two kind of separate and sometimes overlapping constellations. But what kind of intrigued me, the little I know about San Diego history is like, I was reading this one article published in 1973 in a book with kind of overlapping leftists and fake leftists, because that Venn circle is not always a constant, although it would seem like now they practically overlap, but it hasn't always been the case. But whatever, the article referred to San Diego as Richard Nixon's lucky, quote, lucky city, unquote. And I'm very interested in like what Warhamster describes as the Del Mar racetrack shenanigans, which is something you hear about scattered in virtually everything you read about. But I'm sort of interested in getting more like the local picture there. And the lastly, I think, there is this situation where Nixon changed the 1972 RNC, or somebody, let me put it that better, somebody changed the RNC convention location from San Diego to Miami in 1972. And there may, there's probably a number of overlapping reasons for that, but it would be certainly perhaps interesting in looking at some of these kind of regional mafia connections, say San Diego / versus Miami, and how that figured in. Although, as I said, there's probably other reasons overlapping because I haven't looked into it enough, but it sure is an interesting time in both RNC and DNC history because, I call 68 to 72 the Altoona curve of the Democratic Party, and there's no question that there's nothing more censored by the fake left than that, because if you see that, then you're opening up a 3D glasses, to pardon your patented expression, Colonel, a 3D perspective, 3D glasses kind of perspective on the history of the Democrats, where you're asking voters to actually know about the RFK assassination, which leads directly to Henry Wallace. And, oh, right, there was this four freedoms aspect of the Democratic Party, right? So that, anyway, these years are absolutely critical. And I call it triple moding censorship, by which I mean not merely the legacy media censors, but also censored by, the targeted, more local anesthetic style propaganda we see, especially aimed at the so-called compatible left, the CIA's compatible left, in order to prevent the working class from ever gaining a single ounce of power, in my view. But we could disagree on that as to the cause of that, the reason.
Colonel, you want me to touch on the San Diego part?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, great question. Okay. So San Diego was a really sleepy town. In the 20s and 30s, you'd have some Hollywood types who were moving down there for like vacation homes, and they built them very nice. That's why San Diego's North County they got really good sized lots and they're valuable properties. Obviously, with Hollywood, you get some mafioso types from day one, Cleveland Mafia, etc. Post World War II, especially, San Diego became a military town. You've got the San Diego Navy, you got Camp Pendleton, and of course, you got Miramar Air Base. So it's a military town. Where it really saw its growth was in the 80s. And you've heard the Colonel talk about the Yankees and Cowboys. Well, the Cowboys were the oil people and the defense people. A lot of the defense companies grew up in San Diego. San Diego has a lot of defense contractors.
Yep.
That's your connection to the SNLs that we're talking about right there. It's Yankees and Cowboys. San Diego was built by cowboys. After that, everyone from New York moved there and screwed up the whole place. But we don't need to go there today. But that's really where it comes from. So you had like 3 different connections to San Diego growth. 2 of the 3 being nefarious.
Yeah, and we found in Gary Webb's book that all of the guys that ended up with lots of money running cocaine all had houses down there. That's where the CIA gun runner was at. That's where, and of course, it was all connected to the military part of that. All of the military presence in the San Diego area gives you access, and the military, because they steal weapons off of military bases. And CanCon and Alpha and I were talking about that because, you know, a normal military installation, the security around the armory is impenetrable. So there has to be someone on the inside when there's a weapons theft. There has to be. There's no other way you get weapons off a military base unless you have somebody on the inside of the armory staff. And so he mentioned a few of them. El Toro is up the road, just south of Los Angeles, 29 Palms. There's military installations scattered throughout all of Southern California. And there's large caches of weapons associated with every single one of those locations. And so the combination of the military industrial complex, the Mafia, the CIA, and the more moneyed drug traffickers like Blanton, remember we caught him living down there. And the CIA arms guy that was in Gary Webb's book, he was down there. There's a reason why they all coalesce in that area. And of course, all of that ties in the Mafia as well. So you are so mad. Go ahead.
Real quick, Colonel, before I go, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
You can't discount the Tijuana border being right there.
Oh, yeah.
I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, and we covered that in our the show that I did on Alpha Warrior, where Falcon set up shop in Tijuana. He was running cocaine, marijuana, all of that stuff across the border. And Blanton was, one of his guys that would go down there and bring it back. But there was lots of them. You're absolutely right. Thank you for mentioning that. I left that part out. Thank you very much for.
Any book recs? I know before Warhamster goes, like any book recommendations on San Diego history, or is that kind of difficult to get?
Yeah, I've never read anything about it because I lived it.
He knows.
I don't actually have a recommendation.
He lived it firsthand. Why are you so bad? Go ahead.
Again, wonderful work you guys are doing. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to point out it has become so much easier to follow the money with technology and being able to tap into Swift and being able to see all these connections. I know everybody's like constantly in fear of AI, but I can't praise it when it's used correctly. It can be used for good. So and I was going to correct you there when you were saying that the arms that were stolen from, nothing gets stolen from the military. It is absolutely given. So,
yeah. Technically, it's stolen. Legally, it's stolen. But there's always someone on the inside of the theft. Yeah.
There is always someone on the inside there. I mean, you just said it. It is like Fort Knox when it comes to the armory. So you have to have someone on the inside willing to do it, and you have to have more than one person being able to facilitate that.
There's at least 2 because everything has 2 signatures on it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely. Everything has 2 signatures, and it usually happens in the middle of the night.
So I'm very familiar with this because I told you guys the story of me being the cocaine officer at my base in Italy. And that cocaine was in a safe in the cop squadron. And I don't know how I got that additional duty too. I was like the Rubio with like 7 hats on during that assignment. But I'm very familiar with the accountability part of this. Also, when we deployed to northern Iraq, I was given my 9mm. And you take that to the bathroom. You literally leave it nowhere. It is on your person at all times. And there's security checks that come around office by office periodically. And by periodically, I mean once or twice a week to check everybody's weapons. When we deployed forward, you have this web belt that you wear with your 9mm in it. And the general would never wear his. I was his aide. So I had to have 2 web belts on with his 9mm and mine all at the same time. And this is somebody, I'm not used to doing that. But I was petrified the entire time I was there because they instill in you the accountability piece of this. And you have to have that. I always sat next to him on the aircraft. You have to. And I'm telling you, it's like to the level of paranoia, the armed security that you're taught while you're in the military when you're deployed. So the fact that you just have these weapons walking off of military bases is just literally, for anybody in the military, crazy. All along,
Absolutely.
Yeah, all along.
You got to have your head on the swivel, right?
Yeah, all along. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick note based on what you are discussing. The revolving doors thievery or invisibilized hand market between the government arms and the organized crime. I mean, this, but it's at the core of, arming both, and initially pro-Castro and also anti-Castro, and then later anti-Castro. That's all part of the JFK assassination. Yep. So it's one.
You got cut off.
Incident that has every teacher. That little incident that has every teacher teaching the explanations that don't explain instead of the ones that do, and it costs them trillions of dollars. That little thing called the injuries to JFK in Dallas, I think it's in Texas.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Lively discussion. Anybody else have two gun towner? Yeah, that was me. It was the craziest thing. I'm like, I don't even want to have accountability for the one I have. What do you mean I got to carry yours around too? So anyway, yeah, very interesting. Stellar, go ahead.
Well, the other day or last week, you were talking about the missionary or the Mormon massacre, or that massacre that had happened or whatever. And then just now that you guys are talking about San Diego and things, San Diego was also a huge, big settlement for the Mormons. Las Vegas, the Mormon mission that was there, was also, it was supposed to be part of the Spanish Trail. At one time it was called the Mormon Road because there were natural springs all the way down towards San Diego. So I just find that to be very interesting as well.
That is interesting. Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, and to tag along to both Stellar and all along, a lot of the people in San Diego, they live there in the winter, and it's the opposite. They live in the winter in Phoenix and Scottsdale, and then they go to San Diego. So there's a lot of dual state people of Arizona and San Diego. And then my next point was, and I forgot to mention, the last chapter that you read last week, towards the end of it, you brought up Angola. And all along mentioning Castro just reminded me, I wanted to share that recently I've been trying to learn more history of Cuba, and at this whole time in the Bay of Pigs and whatever, and linking to Venezuela. And our friend who joins our chat a couple times, I think his name was Corey, who lives in Colombia, who was communicating with us, and he said that his family sometimes talks about a paramilitary or Cubans in Venezuela. And Cuba, back at the time, via Castro, had a group, and at first they called themselves the Tigers or the Lions, and it was his own the West and the Cuban exiles, and eventually later on they became the name the Black Wasps. And I'm driving now, or else I would post it in our Purple Pill. But these Black Wasps worked internationally and a lot in Africa, in Angola in particular. They were in a battle there trying to help the Angola people from the West, and the usual suspects coming in. So it's pretty interesting, these Black Wasps. And on the Wikipedia, there were a couple who are martyrs now, who were killed in Venezuela on a mission in the 60s. And last week I sent you a link to about the fishing boats in Cuba that were bombed and kidnapped and taken over by Cuban exiles.
Yep.
And it all connects to this stuff. So
it does.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
and
I just wanted to share.
What's interesting is in reading that history of the Cuban presence in Angola is they were actually fighting on for the MNT, whatever there's an initial, it starts with M. They were the good guys. They were the educated people that could actually manage. And I'm not saying any of them were good. I'm saying they were the better of the three clashing factions. And of course, the CIA arms the other two because the other two were corrupt. And one of the other two was related to the guy that they had installed in the Congo because of the shared resources in what would have been like the northeast area of Angola. They had gold and uranium and stuff like that. They shared those same types of resources that the Congo had, for the same reason we went in and murdered Patrice Lumumba. And the Cubans were actually fighting for the good guys. And that blew me away. But you find that same thing throughout South America with Che Guevara. All of the history that we have been taught about what an evil guy he was, if you go back and read all of that history, he was fighting with the people that were opposing the CIA and the international syndicate taking over their countries. And I'm not saying he's a good guy, but I am saying that the history that we were taught of him and what he was doing is exactly the opposite of what we've been told. And I just found that completely amazing. Stellar, go ahead.
Well, she brought up Arizona, so I had to bring that up also. Arizona was also in the 1850s has to do with a lot of the movement of the Mormon Church growing. So southern Arizona, Southern California, Las Vegas, or Nevada and stuff were where they push people to. I think that a couple months ago I had mentioned, when you guys were talking about Ghana, or it might have been a while ago, but when you guys were talking about that, I bring up, because my family's Mormon. Anyway, they have a website like where missionaries are kicked out of, where they're closed from, where they're open from. You're going to see a lot of things of countries back in this, like when I was more active, I would say probably mid 80s, early 80s through the early part of the 90s. If you see, if you're able to pull back, like when they got banned from, and you're going to see, I believe a lot of shady stuff going on. So I honestly believe that Operation Gladio was happening within that religion because they do things worldwide. So,
well, it's been in every other religion. There would be no reason why it wasn't infiltrated into that religion as well. I've not done a lot. That's not true. There was one country, and I'm not going to pull it off the top of my head, where we did confirm that. I just don't remember which one it was. And they were kicked out of that country for what they were doing and the people that they had within their missionary crew. But I don't remember what. Do you remember, Bridget?
I was just racking my brain.
Okay.
All right. They blend together.
They do. Yeah.
And they have seen, like here in Southern Nevada and other places, the water cartel, if you follow like the cartels of water, because water's like gold out here too, mining as well. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on with some of these players that have infiltrated and done a lot of stuff, and we do know that there's a lot of the trafficking that goes on between the Arizona, California borders, these border cities and stuff, and the strongholds that are there. Also, before they had like I do weddings at this place called Nelson's, and it's a ghost town. But at one time, I guess in the early 1900s, late 1800s, again, that time before we even became a state, a lot of the shipping and stuff, they were bringing a lot of people in from the San Diego area and goods through the Colorado River, because we didn't have all those dams at that point, and that was where a lot of supplies came in, whether it was for miners and other extracurricular activities.
That is always associated with shipping. Yeah. Okay. I think we got all of the hands answered.
Oh, one more thing. I was in a space over the weekend, and there's people or groups that are suing the SEC. So I was in this one space, and they were talking about Venezuela. Okay, and we know that the source code for like Smartmatic and stuff is there. This like the key to that. They were asking their AI, going really deep with the AI, and from their research, I mean, there's nothing showing it, but they were talking about these source codes could be modified. Now, this is something that's probably a war hamster guy, but could be modified a little bit. Maybe that's also how they're manipulating a lot of these markets as well. Just thought I'd ask.
Okay, yeah, he could definitely talk to you about the market piece of that. I'm not of the opinion that the source code has ever been under the control of Venezuela. It is well documented that Smartmatic was set up in the expat community in Venezuela for Venezuelans in Miami. And to me, that makes much more sense because of the significant presence of the CIA in Miami and their manipulation of elections, that those three expats, Venezuelan expats that came to the United States, set up Smartmatic in like 2000, in 2004, something like that. In their Smartmatic's website said 2000. I found documentation that said 2004. So in that general area, and they have used it, throughout the world, obviously, in the aftermath of that. To me, based on our research, that timeline makes perfect sense to me, that you bring people in. Now, they went to very prestigious universities over there, so they're from very elite families. Those very elite families in Venezuela were in bed with the CIA prior to Chavez, and in bed with Western oligarchs as well. There's a lot of documentation about, I just reposted, I think it was Joe Lang that did he got it out of a book that is on my list for us to do, about the Jeb Bush presence in Venezuela prior to Chavez. All of those shenanigans led to the Chavez Revolution. All of the corruption of the CIA using their National Guard as trafficking the Cartel de la Sol was actually the two generals in charge of that was on the payroll of the CIA for years and years. So they're attributing what I now know to be emphatically CIA activity to the entire country of Venezuela, and almost pretending that the Chavez Revolution didn't even occur. The whole reason it occurred is because it was their rebellion against all of the corruption. And so I probably wouldn't have been welcome in your space. But anyway.
No. That's why I was asking. I mean, because I didn't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I read about another company a long time ago too, but it was out of Spain, and I can't find anything about that company, and I still remember. So I'm still trying to find it, but I know that Spain had something to do with it as well before Smartmatic. So that was what I was trying to find. But I didn't know, because when they were mentioning that stuff, they were just saying that a lot of these programs might be interlinked, or the coding within it. I mean, it's over my head, but I just was like, oh, wow, there's even more stuff, And then you have these, 3-letter agencies that's going to be disbanded because of Chevron. But, trying to keep everything still separated. So that it was just a presumption. So I didn't know. I just thought I'd bring it up, but
sure,
more than likely not. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me to kind of meld all of the different pieces of information. But as I've said on here many times, we have a much stronger foundation to funnel the information through, because of the patterns that we've already recognized. When someone tells you a story and it is 180 degrees to what has gone on, like, a bajillion times all over the world, they're lying to you. It's out of character. It's out of sync with how they operate. It's not to say that they're not going to do something, totally off the wall, but we've never seen that. It all fits the exact same pattern. And so that's kind of my first filter when I read people's information is, and like I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but I'm going to beat it anyway. When you have a CIA guy tell you that Chavez set up the first torture prisons, you just have to literally discount everything else that comes out of his mouth after that, because in fact, that's not true. In Venezuela specifically, in the early 1970s, the Office of Public Safety was in fact there, and they set those prisons up and tortured and disappeared people as if it was one of the players in Operation Condor. They didn't treat Venezuela any differently than they did the rest, but Venezuela never comes up on the list of countries that participated in Operation Condor, and yet they had all of the same things happening inside of it. And that corruption and that level of infiltration into that company, again, is what gave birth to Chavismo, the rise of Chavez, because they wanted to throw off that yoke of imperialism and have their country back. So, Alon, go ahead.
Yeah, Carl, that's a very interesting point you make regarding, Venezuelan kind of exceptionalism both in the Condor narrative and also the Office of Public Safety of CIA narrative. And it just kind of reminded me of wait a second, in LAPD CIA, and it's really hyphenated, in that relationship where, CIA had built basically a wing into LAPD.
Yes, they did.
And also NYPD, which they used in the Malcolm X assassination, with the Bossy unit run by the same guy who became the, dean of the Watergate burglars, right?
Yes.
What's his name? And so, it's possibly connects to this so-called Venezuelan exceptionalism, and that Hank Hernandez, literally worked in Venezuela before he worked over the RFK witnesses. And on that note, I would urge everyone, there's this amazing documentary called Evidence of Revision, which came out in 1990. The amazing thing is it's virtually all of it is original footage from media that we are told is X, Y, and Z, when maybe it was much more like E, F, and G compared to now's media. Everyone has to watch this stunning episode 4 of Evidence of Revision documentary. It could it could end the Democratic Party, and it would not be too groovy for the CIA either.
Yep. All right. If that's everything, I'm gonna run and grab some dinner. Thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate it. And we will be back tomorrow. Let me check the calendar. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch that Tommy podcast that I was on. We are going to be doing another one on Wednesday at 10 a.m. And I will be doing my normal space on Wednesday, but I do have a Christmas dinner to go to at a community in the local area where I'm going to be a guest speaker. So we will not be able to have a normal length show. So we'll have, a few minutes of Q&As in the immediate aftermath of that show. And then I'm going to have to run out. And then, of course, on Wednesday, I have the Alpha Warrior show. And if War Hamster, God bless him, please keep him in your prayers in his rehab. If he's feeling up to it, we will have our noon show on Thursday, and then our normal show, and then the normal show on Friday. So that's kind of a week overview of where we're going to be. It looks like smooth sailing, just a shorter version of it on Wednesday at 4:00. And then the addition of the Tommy podcast at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the Alpha Warrior show at 9:30, and then Secret Societies on Thursday with Warhamster at noon. So that's the agenda. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. And I will see you tomorrow. Take care, y'all. Okay. Let's look over here on Rumble. Thanks, Tim, for being in here. I will definitely pass on your note to War Hamster. He is a reformed Wall Street banker. He's brilliant, and we love him being in our spaces when he's able. So thanks for those comments. Also, you guys have a nice evening, and I will see you tomorrow.